Pest is our provincial entomologist and is going to give us an update on Pest. Jeff has been with our department for
long time,
over 30 years. And I think we're going to have fun.
No pressure.
Okay, good.
I'm not used to the audience being so far away. If you were kids, I'd have you sit on the floor, but you're like me, you'd never get back up. I think so. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? I don't think you need the mic. I generally don't need a mic. I'm loud and I move around a lot. Yeah. Okay. If you have a problem, I'll speak up. Again, thank you for having me. Jeff Ogden, Provincial Forest Entomologist. When we started doing these things, somebody's asked how long you've been with the department. We used a slide deck and wrote on plastic sheets on an overhead projector. So we've come a long way. I'm going to give you a quick update on the forest conditions of last year with some of the projects that the province has been doing in the last 12 months. But first I'd like to acknowledge the people that actually do the work. I do some of it, but they took my picture off this slide, actually. Dang. Anyway, we work with the forest techs from our office. We also work with our regional forest pest detection officers, regional services throughout the province help us. We also rely heavily on our fleet service for our vehicles and for our helicopters. We have a lot of collaboration with Canadian Forestry Service and Canadian Food Inspection Agency when it comes to research and invasive species. Now, what does the Forest Protection Group do? We monitor forest pests through a variety of methods, whether it's pheromone trapping, where's my button here? Pheromone trapping, flight intercept traps. We also do aerial surveys with the helicopters. We do branch sampling, and we rely on people to send in observations because we're not going to be, there's 4 full-time techs in the lab. There's 2 or 3 of us in the main office. We have 23 to 25 regional forest techs out and about the province, but it's only a small portion of the job. They may also do private lands. They may also do wildlife. They may also do other things. So we're limited on what we can do. So we rely on other folks. You out there, if you see something, please let us know. HWA was one that hemlock woolly adelgid is one that an arborist alerted the province that we had it. It wasn't one of our surveys. Next. I have 41 slides in 25 minutes. This could be fun. with our data, we don't just throw up a map. Now we're starting to analyze it, looking for trends. This one, for example, is spruce budworm. When I started, it was way down here. And there wasn't anything with spruce budworm. And slowly the population is increasing. Not huge numbers, but it is increasing. But we monitor these over time. That's why we have the traps in the same spot for most cases. That's why we do the same aerial survey. Sometimes it seems very repetitive. And if you've seen me do these talks, oh, it's the same damn graph. Oh, it's the same map. But we need to follow that throughout the year to find out if there are any trends. We also, now we're starting to do more than just put a map up. We're doing nearest neighbor and some heat maps to give you a general idea of where the populations are. I don't do this. This is for GIS specialists and people that are smarter than I am in this department. But to give you an idea of, it's not just these 5 or 6 dots. It's this area that we're concerned with. We're also doing more things other than just putting our traps out. We're looking at biocontrol and hemlock woolly adelgid, for example, and for emerald ash borer. We're collaborating with the federal government to work on these projects to get away from pesticides in some cases, but also to have a long-lasting control of some of these pests. We're doing pheromone trials. In this case, it was to develop a pheromone that could attract, white mark tussock. We haven't had one in the past. This one, the work has resulted in a specific pheromone for that species. They just haven't developed it into a commercial thing yet, but we are part of that. All different, different monitoring techniques. See, that do work. This is peeling a tree. We're doing, in this case, it was girdling trees for emerald ash borer. You put a trap over for emerald ash borer, the emerald ash borer is attracted to that. Well, trap trees are used as well, where you girdle a tree, stress the tree works as a trap itself. And in Maine and some of the other states, they use these exclusively because they're much more sensitive than the traps and the pheromones. But this is a destructive sampling because the tree that you girdle is dead. So we're just leaning into that now. We also do some branch sampling for emerald ash borer because when the emerald ash borer first attacks a tree, it's usually up in the smaller branches. So if you may not detect it in a trap, but by collecting the branches, and you don't have to take all the branches, just one or two, peel the branches and you're looking for the little galleries in there. Different techniques. This is, oh geez, wrong button. And I can't see, so I'm going like this. Another thing has changed in 30 years. I used to be able to see. And I'll get to that. That's releasing HWA predators. This one is releasing predators for EAB. We're getting into new softwares and applications for our handheld devices. Way beyond me. I'm still used to paper. I still use paper. But this is better for quick access in the forest. It's better to keep our data under wraps and you know where it is, and better for displaying our results. And most recently, we're getting into using drones, satellites, instead of using the helicopters or our asses and trucks, getting a better idea of what's going on in the forest. Change detection is this year, well, it's all green. 2 years down the road, if you compare that satellite imagery, oh, there's something going on. Again, we can't be everywhere. So if we can do a bulk of our work from a laptop and have a GIS specialist analyze that stuff, we can focus where our work goes and where our bodies go and get to the spots where there may be actual damage. We're also looking at compounding disturbances. It's not just, well, the bugs eating the trees. We now have wind events. We have climate change. We have fire, lots of fire. And for those of you who have heard me speak, I don't do fire. It's been an ongoing joke for 30 years. But because of last year's fire, I now do fire. Also, it's very interesting because insect damage will increase your risk of fire. Wind damage will increase your risk of fire, increase your risk for insect damage. All these things are intertwined, and now we're starting to look at different projects that we do as a group, as opposed to being our own silos and doing our own separate thing. Fire's cool now, but I didn't say that out loud. Anyway, climate change, the effects of climate change. I'll get into some of this as we get into each species. But sometimes the effects of climate change are good for our forest pests. Like an invasive. If there's no cold winters, they'll survive. In other cases, some of our native species, our crappy springs or our mild winters aren't necessarily good for them. They've evolved in a boreal forest setting where they need that cold period. They're there, they're resting, they're not spending any energy. But if you have a warm snap in February for a week of plus 20, they're going to start to wake up. They're going to use some of that energy. And then when they actually wake up in March, they don't have enough energy to be as fecund or as large or even survive because of these little winter breaks. We also, the increased dampness, where we don't usually have as much rain. Well, we have more rain and shake stick at. But fungal issues and diseases are more prevalent when you have increased precipitation and warmer temperatures. Now these are the insects that we currently monitor within the Forest Protection Group. There's 12 or 14 of them there. Most of the arrows, as you can see, are pointing down. That doesn't mean that they're going away, but they're kind of there. Background noise. There's no indication that these populations are increasing. The southern pine beetle here, this is one that's coming up from the States. It's hard on hard pines, so red pine and jack pine, and down in the west where we're battling hemlock woolly adelgid, if we lose those hemlocks, the only thing down there that's big and beautiful are the pine. If this thing comes up, it could be in a threat of losing them as well. We have traps out for this species in the west, and so far in the last 2 years, there's no indication that it's here. Closest it is southern Maine, but there is a risk of it moving up. But we will continue to monitor it, and hopefully it just doesn't make it here. It's a southern pine beetle, so it is found in the southern states, but because of our mild winters, it's surviving. These things have a lower cold tolerance than our bark beetles. Our native bark beetles, the thing that kills them is -40. Well, we haven't seen -40 anymore, so their populations just keep going. These ones, it's about -20, -25. We still see some -20 to 25. Last year we had one day, February 4th. This year, I haven't checked my data loggers yet, but I don't think we had any. So our forests are ripe for something to move up and take them. The other ones that are on the rise, spruce budworm is on the rise, which I'll get to. Small, but it's on the rise. Local populations. And our invasives, the beech leaf mining weevil, the emerald ash borer, and the hemlock rhododendron. Spruce budworm, we continue to monitor this through pheromone traps, automated pheromone traps. These are set out along the coast to pick up any migration events. They take a photo every few hours, or every 6 hours, and if there's a migration event from another area such as Quebec, Newfoundland, possibly New Brunswick, their population is kind of not really doing anything, so the chances are slim that they'd actually come from New Brunswick. But it will pick it up, because those populations, if they migrate in, will augment our populations and build them up. Newfoundland had that issue where trillions of them are coming across from Quebec, and their local populations were building up on their own, but when you add trillions of them, that really adds to your population. We also do fall branch sampling. I can never see, there we go. Just leave my finger on the button. Fall branch sampling, and I think that's all we're going to do. So I mentioned spruce budworm or climate change. In the case of spruce budworm, the climate change can also affect the phenology of the plants versus the bugs. If it's a warm spring, the bugs may wake up early. The plants may not have yet produced the buds may not have broken, and may not have anything to eat. Or the other way around. Maybe the buds break first and the larvae don't wake up. So that's one thing about seasonal development and changes in phenology and climate change. And I already mentioned the energy burn. If they wake up in the middle of February, they burn that energy. They may not have enough to develop later. Now this, I don't know if this is going to work or not. There's a video. Shoot. There it goes. This is just showing that spruce budworm over time since the outbreak in Quebec. The one thing I want to point out is there's not much going on in New Brunswick. That was their first big area right there. They had about 60,000 hectares that they treated under the early intervention strategy. That's where you treat on little, it's like whack-a-mole is what the feds are calling it. Population builds up, you knock it down. Population comes up, you knock it down. We don't want to eliminate spruce budworm from the landscape. It does its job. We know what it does. It's supposed to do what it's supposed to do. But we also don't want to see the damage. So you keep it down to a level where the predators and the parasites can keep the population at a dull roar where you're not going to see the damage, but the budworm is still there. In New Brunswick, this year they might have a program of about 8,000 hectares. Very, very tiny. 4 or 5 spots. Newfoundland, on the other hand, it's all along here, and their population's higher because they had more migration events from Quebec. They also started a little late. They missed getting in there right away and doing the first small treatment. And then their national park, Grossmorn, opted not to treat. They go through their processes, which are consultations and public consultations, and they decided not to treat. And now, at this point, they are actually a source for local populations. Their budworm population is increasing, and it's spreading out to the other areas. So that Newfoundland may no longer be getting migration events from Quebec because their population is dropping and slowly coming to an end. But because of Grossmorn, not because of the park, but anyway, they're now moving out from that area to other spots. Now, Nova Scotia, I mentioned their populations are increasing. They've dropped on the mainland. Our trap catchers were down from last year. Our trap catchers are down everywhere, to be honest. In 2022, we had 500 up in Mead Cove. This year, we only had 110. And high is relative. So a high catch of moths in Nova Scotia is about 300, 400. You talk to somebody in Ontario where their population is just starting to build up, they have 1,500, 2,000. So when the traps get so full you have to weigh the moths, that's when it starts to be a real issue. But because the province has adopted the early intervention strategy, which is that whack-a-mole sort of thing, we're looking at population levels of a certain number, which would trigger a treatment. These numbers, the moths, if the numbers get up over 100, we go into additional fall sampling for branch sampling, looking for the overwintering larva, which is the stage that indicates if there's going to be any population or any population increase or any defoliation, because that's a local population. If you're finding larvae on the trees, that's not just something being blown in, it's something that's actually feeding locally. And I showed you this before, but the trap catch is increasing. So here's the overwintering larva results. They don't look very big, but they're all in one little spot. There was 5 locations that were over that early intervention strategy threshold of 7 L2 per branch, which isn't a lot. Again, if you talk to Newfoundland, they have 34 L2 per branch. That's the overwintering caterpillar. It's called an L2. But because those numbers, that would have triggered a program this year. All of our sites are inside Cape Breton National Park, and they are still going through, they just started their consultation and their internal process on whether they want to adopt early intervention. So they figure it might be done soon, but not in time for us to have a program for this year. So we're holding off having a program in 2024. The area would have been about 900 hectares, not massive. But if I'm going to dip my toe into something that I've never done before, I'd rather it be small than the entire western side of Cape Breton. Here's the sites there. We will be doing follow-up sampling this year at these sites and at the sites that picture dummy. At the sites, we had some sites south of the park that were higher in 2022. Right? This is 24, right? We will be following up and seeing if there's any local population building with beat sheets, actually boots on the ground. Because from the air, we detected 0 defoliation. And here are the next steps. We're just waiting on Cape Breton National Park to go through the recommendation process. What was that for? Climate change, just talking about impacts on climate change. The warmer temperatures I mentioned, some of the invasive species, they're only up here because cold isn't taking them out. So that's the cue to get the invasive species. To do our invasive species work, Canadian Food Inspection Agency is the main group that deals with new invasives. Anything that comes across our desk that's new, we go through Canadian Forestry Service first, or CFIA first. And CFIA does their little magic, get us involved. We do collaborative surveys, but CFIA also regulates areas. Like the western end, they've regulated the western part of the province. Once they regulate an area, they pull out. They no longer do any surveillance in there. Then it's relying on the province. So we do all the work for hemlock woolly adelgid in the west. Anything in the city, HRM for emerald ash borer. If it's in our HRM, CFIA does not monitor it, we do. And we have other partners, including Parks Canada, some NGOs like MCFC. What's that? That's it. Thank you. We work closely with them on certain ones. Emerald ash borer. We have a few spotted traps throughout the province, but if you see the federal map for CFIA, there's well over 100 traps in the province, Cape Breton, province, that was bad, but that one. for emerald ash borer, but these are our sites. And the ones in the city, we're the only ones that monitor. And there, anything outside of the regulated zone up until this spring, we're 0. This spring, this is a very dramatic photo. This was when the park that EAB was found in first. So in 2018, these trees were green and healthy, and this is the same tree, a little bend in it, because I did it before and it was the wrong trees, and people say, it's not the same spot. Garbage cans in the same spot too. Anyway, these trees in 2020, we investigated the spot and we found, looks like there's a few popples at the rear end of it. Other than that, they're all gone, they removed them.
Where is it?
DeWolf Park in Bedford. This is the spread of EAB in the park since we started monitoring it. Here's DeWolf Park here. And we place the traps outside of that area. So they're all along, these came back negative this year, but last year they came back positive. This year we're going to spread out from where the positive ones are to see how fast this thing is moving. We will retain some of them in the main part of the city to monitor over time to see if the population fluctuate for one reason or another. We also will be doing, one of these sites will have biocontrol release this year. That is the plan. Now biocontrol release in this case is, here we are, that's Heba. 3 tiny little wasps, and I mean these things are tiny and very species specific. They only feed on metallic wood boring beetles of this genus. They don't feed on anything else. They don't sting. One of them you can barely see. It feeds on the eggs. It lays its egg inside of the egg of the emerald ash borer. Tiny, tiny. But in reality, the ones that we're releasing now are not going to help the trees that we have them on. The population isn't going to build up enough to protect those trees, because if there's EAB in this stand, those trees are likely going to die. But if you build up that population of the predators and parasites, they will protect the saplings that are coming up. So that's the plan with this particular biocontrol. It is a Canadian Forestry Service project, and we are just assisting. I'm told I have to say that. 5 minutes, good lord, man. Okay, brown spruce longhorn beetle. This was a beastie from back in the day. It was deemed a secondary pest. Did not feed on healthy trees. Initially thought it was initially believed to feed on healthy trees in Point Pleasant Park in Halifax. If you've ever been to Point Pleasant Park, you know that those trees are not very healthy. Between the foot traffic, the dog pee, the smoke and smog from the city, none of those trees were healthy. So after a decade of working on BSLV, they found that no, it's a secondary species, doesn't really harm trees unless they're under stress for something else. With spruce budworm coming back, my concern a couple of years ago was, okay, well you have these large stands with big red spruce. Previous outbreaks, those trees survived. They may have been ugly by the end of a budworm outbreak, but they did survive. With this beastie on the landscape, they're attracted to those weakened spruce. So they may go in and take out with those remaining stands of the larger spruce, but we haven't looked where this thing has been since 2011. So we don't know how far it's actually spread. So that's the purpose of this survey, is to go back to where they were in the past, are they still there, and spread the trap system out and see how far they've actually spread, just to get an idea at least where BSLV, the brown spruce longhorn beetle, is. This was the only positive trap last year. That was a 5 miles Provincial Park, and there was about a dozen beetles in it. But we will continue this survey as long as I'm allowed. Beach leaf mining weevil, we'll go through this one somewhat quickly. This one is really hard on the beach, started in 2012. Initially it was just a few dieback branches in the city and in Sydney. Not a huge deal, but within 4 years you're starting to see mortality. Now you're seeing large swaths of beach die from this beast. And there's no natural control. There's no predators, there's no parasites, there doesn't seem to be any fungus that are getting in and taking these things out. This is the last year's aerial survey, 53,000 hectares of dead, primarily dead or completely defoliated trees. They may not be dead yet. Chances are they will be. The year previous, our mapping was we only saw the bulk of it was up here in Cape Breton. And these little pockets were very, very tiny, but in 2023 they found a number more. There seems to be a fair bit down Digby Neck as well, but it's getting confused with ash rust. And that's really hard to distinguish. You got two hardwoods on the same hillside, which is what's killing it, the ash rust or that. We are working with some federal government employees this year with drones, and they're going to try to do some change detection and figure out between ash rust and EAB. So that's, again, beyond me, but very interesting stuff. Hemlock woolly delge, this is the last beastie I will talk about. Yeah, we have well over 80,000 hectares of dead or severely defoliated trees, hemlock stands in the western end, and this is what you can see from the air. When you get into the stands, you realize there's a heck of a lot more land that's being impacted by HWA than this 80,000. We fly over spots where I know those trees they're not producing any new growth. They haven't produced any new growth for 2 years, but they're still greenish. So even when you're flying over top of them, they look fine. So you could triple that, or easily triple that 80,000 of the hectares that are being impacted by HWA. When it first, 2018, when it was first found, 2017 maybe, I believe, we mapped 18,000 hectares in the west. Now we're up to 80,000. This is the spread. We now have two new sites, one in St. Croix and one in Halifax. Likely spread by people. You can carry it on yourself, carry it on your car. Could be birds. This is a natural, that's not very far from Kenful Ravine. And then we had a positive DNA find in Victoria Park. What they put out were big funnels, and they were looking for stuff to fall in, and then they tested it for environmental DNA of HWA, and 2 of them came back positive. We have since gone back in with an army of folks and did a survey with pole pruners, ground survey, and looked for an entire day of looking for HWA, evidence of HWA, and we didn't find any, which is good. It could have come off of a vehicle, because both of the traps were close to a parking lot, so it could have easily been wool off a vehicle. Wool doesn't mean anything for infestation, because it's just wool. But we will continue to monitor visually, and the feds just put out 2 new eDNA traps in the park to monitor for this year. There's the eDNA trap. We're also participating, in the chemical treatment of up to 1,500 hectares in the western end on protected lands, whether it's stem injection or basal bark spray. This process has been pretty slow, partly because of hiring and getting people out there, but hopefully this year they put a dent into the hectares. There's Dan Levine over here. He's now retired. He's still alive. He's just gone. This is one of those dashboards I spoke of, our GIS folks, and the ones much younger than I am that are working on the technology part. But we're up to 220 hectares of the 1,500 hectares. But they've mapped areas that we will be getting into shortly. And the last thing I'll end on is the biocontrol releases that we had last fall. First time this has been done in Canada. Leucopius nigrinus, a beetle that's very specific to HWA, only feeds on woolly adelgid. It will feed on balsam woolly adelgid. It's an invasive, and most people would rather see it gone anyway. And a pine adelgid, which is on white pine, which is native. So we have to watch how much damage it does to the white pine adelgid. But it's the first time this has been released in Canada. There were open releases where we released. The total release was about 4,100 beetles. They came from BC. where they are native and they feed on adelgid. They're on this Excelsior, pretty high-tech stuff. Take it out of the container, put it on the branch, tie it, walk away. And you have to do it in the sunshine. Rough. And those tiny little beetles. And then there's also sleeve cages because we wanted to figure out their survival rate. And they had about a 50% survival rate in last year's winter, which is good. And this is inside the sleeve cage because I'm smaller than Lucas is. I actually went right in, and we put 5 of them on there, and then they monitored them throughout the winter. Some of them were, we released more this spring, about 1,000 more, and open releases in KG, and some of the staff went back and they saw them on the lower branches. They were not only feeding on the adelgids that were down there, but they were actually mating. Or dancing, I'm not sure. So there's your pest guide that we no longer have, but we're gonna try to get that more of those. More people out there that are looking. If you see anything, by all means, send any samples into local DNR offices. They all come to me. If it's anything to do with insects, it comes to me. Speaking of insects, there's well over 200 to 300 species of bees in Nova Scotia. Most of them are solitary bees, and in an open forest setting, there'd be dozens of species because they like all the plants that are in there. So that's what they all the side of flycatcher will be feeding on. That's it. Any questions?